Hi, thanks for joining me and welcome back to the channel if you've been here before. So what we're going to be talking about today is Steely Dan, The Royal Scam. And I have two copies of that here, and it was basically, two versions have been released in the last couple of weeks. I think they actually came out on the same day, but we've got the 2025 reissue, which is cut by, let me look this up, Joe Nino Hernes at Sterling Sound in Nashville, from Bernie Grundman's recent digital remaster, made from the original analog tapes, I think, but mastered to digital by Bernie Grundman. And then what we're pitching that against is, again, released on the same day, the as lavish as you can get it and as luxurious as you can get it. Again, remastered by Bernie Grundman from the original tapes, but this time all analog and cut by Bernie Grundman at 45 RPM, pressed by QRP onto Clarity Vinyl and presented in, you know, as I say, as lavish and luxurious a package as you can get. So Steely Dan's Royal Scam. Interestingly enough, this is the last of the Analogue Productions UHQR Steely Dan series, but it's not the last chronologically. You know, it does finish this extremely fantastic UHQR series. And what's quite interesting is that it comes in the old style UHQR box, which I'll just show you here. So this has actually got a wood fillet. If I show you there, solid wood fillet in here with a leather effect cloth over. If I pull the shrink back, you can see that this is a sort of a matte leather effect box. And in here, let me show you, there's a couple of spec sheets and advertising flyers and the like. And then an absolutely, oh, here we are, I'll get back to that. An absolutely beautiful, printed at Stoughton Press. Lovely crackle as you open it up. Beautiful cover, absolutely exceptional quality with the lyrics. And this was on the inner sleeve, I think, in the on the original version. But this is a really beautiful cover. I still, to this day, I think it's, you know, it's sort of, you know, part of me wants to just put the albums into this sleeve and put them on the shelf as is, but of course this extremely lavish box does keep things extremely nice. And then of course you've got the two Clarity Vinyl 45 RPM 200 gram LPs, and these are just exquisite. They really are. Okay, so I'm just going to pop this back in here. Right, and I just want to show you this liner notes by Donald Fagen himself. So here we've got some pictures of the tape boxes, which is really cool. So these are, hang on, let me have a look. ABC Recording Studios, Beverly Boulevard, Los Angeles, California. Dolby Masters, can't really see, where's the speed? Oh, 30 IPS. Very nice. So that's what they've gone back to make this pressing, to make this cut, and it's been done by Bernie. In fact, like I said, both of these have been mastered by Bernie Grundman, and they do sound quite different. So that's part of why I think this is worth talking about as a matter of interest. Okay, so having just shown you what you get here, I will show you now what you get for your, well, I paid, as you can see, $26.99. So you get a, you know, a perfectly decent non-gatefold album. The inner sleeve, as I mentioned in the gate, is basically what's the gatefold on the other issue. So you've got a picture of Walter Becker and Donald Fagen here, and the lyrics all very nice. I do like to get lyric sheets. You'll notice that this isn't lined, and so I've put the LP into an anti-static inner, which just keeps things nice. But that, you know, I normally would just slide that in there like that. You see, beautiful. So let's start off talking about how this one sounds, okay? So the first thing is you put it on, the first track, Kid Charlemagne. It's got good stage width, the vocals central but not very projected. The drums are nice. Everything feels a little bit sort of turned up to 11, and I think that's really the overall feeling I get from this album. Is I'm not going to go through track by track by track. I mean, I've made notes track by track by track, but time and again, what they say is that the bass is great in terms of establishing a great sort of groove and funk and bounce to the music, but it's not a very detailed bass, and it's not a massively agile bass either. And throughout, where you'd sort of have the groove established by bass, but also sort of a drum and maybe a piano, sometimes a horn stab or a rhythm guitar, kind of like a reggae almost kind of type of thing going on. On this, all you get is this big bass groove and funk. Now, I got to say, it does make for a very listenable record. It really does. So it's not a complete sort of washout or a loss. And I think if you're playing this on a sort of, starter system type turntable, you'll probably be really happy with it. Okay, the overall thing is definitely, it's big and it's bouncy and it's fun, but it's as I go through track by track, as I say with Kid Charlemagne, obviously first impression I got was everything feels a bit turned up to 11, which is another way of saying it's all a bit compressed. Okay, but I've written here in my notes, but the bass turned up to 12. Don't Take Me Alive, that sort of gets crunchy and gritty at time. Sign-In Stranger, the piano there is a little bit metallic, a little bit sort of glassy. The bass is tight but plummy. The drums are a tad flat, and I've sort of on several of the songs I've described the drums as being a bit sort of cardboardy. You just get this sort of like floppy flap as you hit there's no sense of the skin and the resonant sort of the drum of the drum, so to speak. The body of it resonating. It's just a sort of a thwop as the stick hits like a piece of wet cardboard or something almost. And that really is a sort of a trait. Backing vocals often are quite muddled, and particularly where it's the girl backing vocals, really quite sort of gritty and grainy and frankly not very nice. And at times the guitar's a bit glassy. I think that's really where I'd say this one is. It's a good sounding record, because I don't think Steely Dan made a bad sounding record, but this is definitely a good one. It's actually one of my favourite Steely Dan albums. I know most people seem to like Asia best, and I think for me Asia's just been overplayed as a hi-fi demo track over the decades I've been working in the industry, and I actually think the Royal Scam and Can't Buy a Thrill probably my favourite couple. I don't know. I might do a roundup of these now we've got the lot and sort of rank them. But anyway, I'm not going to go on about over and over every single track. Looking down my notes here on side 2, it's just everything's just a little bit one dimensional. That bass is very big, it's very rounded, it's very full. Now, if you like a big, bassy, bouncy sound, you might actually prefer this to the UHQR, because there's definitely more bass, okay? But it's just, it's big, it's bouncy, it's fat, in what some people might think is the best possible way, okay? definitely worth $26.99, absolutely, without a shadow of doubt. And if I hadn't heard the UHQR, I'd probably still play this. There's no question. Okay, it's a good record, but to put it in perspective, let's talk about now this UHQR. Now, whereas that cost $26.99, this cost $150. Translate that into pounds, it's probably about £120 or something it cost me, I reckon. So let's say it's 5 times the price, just for argument's sake. Now, I mean, you probably get 5 times the stuff, for starters, because as we've already established, you've got twice the vinyl, except these are 200 gram, not 180 gram, and they're not, cheap, crappy vinyl pressed at GZ. These are Clarity Vinyl pressed at QRP, which is, absolutely one of the best pressing plants on the planet. And I think I've mentioned before, the only thing I don't like about these is, I mean, in this light, it's easy to see where the tracks stop, but funnily enough, over on my turntable, when you place it down, because you can see through the clear vinyl, you see the other side's track spacings too, and it's just it's incredibly difficult to sort of queue up halfway through a side. That's literally the only negative. I don't find jumping up and down twice as much to be a real problem. I really don't. So you get a lot more. You get what is, I think, a really lovely box in a kind of antiquated style, but these are old recordings, and this is the ultimate sort of historical document, if you like, of Steely Dan's The Royal Scam. So this matches all the other boxes in the Steely Dan series. And I know people go on and on and on and on. I had a visit from my friend Henry last week. He lives in South Africa. Came all the way over to talk hi-fi and records and stuff, which is extremely cool. And he spent a lot of time talking about UHQR packaging and how he really doesn't like the new style boxes. And yeah, I'm kind of with him on that, but they are what they are. I don't think Chad's going to change. So anyway, let's get on to the sound, because that is the absolute reason that anyone is going to spend 5 times the money. Okay, so we start off, we put on Kid Charlemagne. Now, the first thing that's almost immediately apparent is the keyboards have got way more colour and detail and shape. Each note is sort of, it's just got expression and texture and sort of feel to it, really. The sound stage is wider, it's less thick, and it's less sort of opaque, and you really are quite immediately aware of the fact that there's significantly less bass weight, but this isn't a negative thing. This sounds nimble and agile and groovy and funky, and it's just joining in with a shuffle. And that shuffle is something I want to get onto too, because it's a really important thing. The bass doesn't sound fat and bloated and sort of overblown like it does on the regular cut. Okay, now I'm going to talk about that shuffle, because the drums are the other thing that really sound different, and on this they just sound fantastic. Okay, so the hi-hat, it just sounds like a hi-hat, and the way the drums are being played, there's more sort of slide and slidey shuffle, there's more groove, and the way that the bass entwines and interweaves with that, the way the piano's playing, there's much more agility, there's much more going on, and it's much more kind of captivating and entrancing. It really is. The backing vocals are way better on this. I mean, the backing vocals on the regular one, really, they're obviously there and you can hear them, but they're just sort of like, a gritty, sandpapery sort of version of the lead vocals thrown into the background. It all sounds a bit messy. particularly, as I say, where there's the girl, the female backing vocals, on the regular version they just sound like a glassy fudge, whereas on this they sound sweet and open and and expressive as well. That's the whole thing. So the whole groove is more agile, more nimble, and you just get this sort of shuffle kind of bounce and groove and funk to it. And the one other thing I'll say about on the Kid Charlemagne is the guitar is just more expressive. It's less of just a sort of a electric guitar sort of wailing kind of sound. It's much better. The Caves of Altamira. Okay, there's some horns on this, and I tell you what, I was listening to this, it just made me think, Chad, what about some Earth, Wind and Fire? UHQRs, or just double 45s, or even just a 33 RPM Analogue Productions Earth, Wind and Fire series. I mean, that would probably be, frankly, the best of the lot. Although, 45 RPM is going to sound better, I know, but it's just, the dynamism, the sort of that stabbing kind of colourful energy of the horns is just awesome. They're clean and clear, and the recording of Fagen's voice is something that I think we need to talk about again. It's it is nasal, it is a slightly sort of veiled voice in the way it's been recorded, but on the UHQR it is definitely clearer and cleaner than on the regular one. Overall, this is just the drums, the cymbal, the snares, the toms, they all sound absolutely superb. Natural, analog, resonant. You can hear the skin, you can hear the drum body, you can hear that the sound, the different sound of the different drums, and the way that the drummer sort of just rolls across. It's just it all sounds supreme. And the horns again, the horn section, it just sounds sublime. It's clear, it's bright, it's creamy, it's dynamic, exuberant, and joyful. Okay. Again, I've got notes on the whole lot of the whole album all the way through, but Don't Take Me Alive, again, I loved it. The shuffle of the bass and the drums, and the guitar as well is noticeably superior on the UHQR. But again, I think the shuffle of the bass and the drums, that's where the UHQR absolutely knocks it out the park. It just doesn't get swampy. So anyway, if we go over to side 2, which of course, disc 2 on a 2 LP set, Green Earrings, there's much more urgency to the bass groove on the UHQR than the regular version. The way the drum fills roll across the soundstage, it's that tunefulness and sort of analog texture and timbre that just make it sound full and involving and pull you into it. That's the thing about great analog recordings. They really do. The guitars, where there are sort of guitars sort of squeals and wails on this, they're more incisive, they're more expressive than just a sort of a gritty screeching noise on the regular one. The drums have got more weight, depth and body. The vocal is less veiled and more expressive. I mean, what more could you ask for? Haitian Divorce, again, one of my favourite tracks on the album, but it is one of my favourite. I'll have to think about it a bit more, but this could even be my favourite Steely Dan album. I'm not sure. It's as I say, probably between this and Can't Buy a Thrill. But anyway, Haitian Divorce, there's much more of that funky reggae-esque kind of rhythm. The bass is way more expressive. That sort of guitar sort of rhythm, guitar sort of chink is much better on the UHQR than on the regular one. The song is funky, it flows, the melodies are sort of captivating, and it just makes you feel really good, really kind of alive, awake, summery, refreshing, enlightening. It's just brilliant. And that weird sort of in the left channel, you've got, I don't know, I don't know whether it's the old Peter Frampton sort of talk box, you know, wah, 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 type of guitar thing. I'm not sure. It sounds a bit like that. I'm really not a fan, but it just sounds more there. I mean, if it is a talk box guitar or whatever it is, then, you know, they make far, far, far better use of it than Peter Frampton does. But, you know, you know, Frampton Comes Alive is one of those albums that, you know, multi-platinum, clearly most of the world loves, and I just can't bear it. Okay, let's get on to side D of this, which is the second half of side 2 on the regular album. So we've got Everything You Did, and closing up with the Royal Scam. Basically, there's more light, and there's more space, and there's more air on the UHQR. The vocal is far more projected. It's clearer. It's more solid. There's more texture and timbre. You can hear Fagen's voice without it feeling veiled. The drums, yet again, just massively so. I think where the bass on the regular version, where this bass is just sort of fatted up, it sort of completely ruins everything that would be playing in an interplay with the bass, like the piano and the drums. You know, as I say, the drums just sound sort of flat and cardboardy, and the piano does to some degree too. There's sections on the regular LP here where the piano sounds plasticky, where it sounds sort of ceramic-y. It just really isn't great. Whereas, on here you can tell, I think you can tell it's an electric piano, and there are some real kind of like bass chords that are played that have got real depth and colour and weight to them. The UHQR is so much better. And, you know, you've got, I mean, the Royal Scam, the opening of that title track, where you've got, on the regular version, it's just like a big bassy sort of congealed lump of bass, you know? On here, you've got the drums, the bass drum, the kick drum, the guitar, the piano, the keyboards, and the bass, all playing together. And it's a layered, multi-textured, expressive thing. You know, you've got the organ right over at the rear of the soundstage on the right, and it's just, it pulls so much space into your listening environment. It opens up the sound dynamically, spatially, expressively. It's awesome. It really, really, really is awesome. You know, you've got those sort of rhythmic stabs of you know, whether it's guitar, piano, organ, whatever, that enhance the drum beats and the bass and don't get swamped by it. And it's beautiful, 100% beautiful. So this is the last of the UHQRs. I've got them all. These are definitely the best versions of the Steely Dans of all of the albums that I've heard. They really, really, really are. And by a country mile, it's not subtle. The difference between these, we talked about this, they're out on the same day, okay? Both mastered by Bernie Grundman. Now, whether Bernie mastered this with that big bouncy sound to sound better on sort of, radio streaming, cheap turntables, whether he mastered it like that by design, or whether that's Joe Nino Hernez at Sterling Sounds edition. Obviously, when you cut something, there's a degree of mastering takes place there too. Certainly in terms of EQing the bass and the treble as well, de-essing. So where the majority of that change comes in, I don't know, but it's interesting. But I think for your average listener, if you're listening on a moderate hi-fi system, then this budget version, the Bernie Grundman digitally remastered 2025 release, is it's a great sounding record. It's fun and it's bouncy and it's big and it's bold Okay. The 2025 Bernie Grundman AAA All Analog remaster from the original Analog master tapes is in another league. It is layered, it is textured, it pulls apart the mix so that the whole is increased. You can see into the mix, you can see every single element in there. You can count the horns almost, and the guitars, the bass, the drums. You can certainly hear the difference from each of the drums in the kit. It's absolutely magnificent in that respect, but it puts them together as the whole without making one thing overshadow as happens on the budget cut. It really is. It sort of gives you all the sum of the parts, and then it presents them in a way that makes that even greater than the whole has previously been experienced. Okay, so 100%, absolutely 100%. I guess this is going to be the last release in the old style Analogue Productions boxes. It'll join the others on my shelf, very happily. Interestingly enough, I mentioned before about the, it's not the last one chronologically, and actually they're numbered. This is UHQR 0013/45. As I say, I think this is the album before Asia, so UHQR 0014/45 is the Asia matrix number. So putting this on the shelf in order of serial number, catalogue number, whatever, we'll also be putting them on the shelf in chronological order of release, which is a nice tiny little touch. Okay, on that note, I'll say thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Cheers for now. Bye.